Hi, this is Rachel in Recovery. We're here with Tia Levings, and she's going to tell us a little bit about herself and then answer some questions.
Hi, I'm glad to be here today.
Yeah.
Like a bio. We should start with a bio, I guess. Yeah, I'm an author who wrote a memoir called A Well-Trained Wife. It's now available for pre-order. It's the story of my escape from Christian Patriarchy. I was in the Bill Gothard Institute of Basic Life Principles, but also a Southern Baptist fundamentalist church that became more restrictive as I grew. And then we went into Reformed theology and very high control Presbyterianism. Um, and there's a whole lot of plot points along the way. And that I educate on the abuses in Christian fundamentalism online today on all social platforms. And that's usually how people find my work. And I'm looking forward to our conversation today.
What was the realization that you were in a spiritually abusive community?
This is an interesting question because I think spiritual abuse is probably the last component that dawned on me. Because I was in a very physically violent situation, sexual, financial, emotional, psychological, all of those abuses took the forefront. And it was not until I had escaped my situation, had been years in trauma recovery, that we started to put words to what landed me in that situation in the first place, which was spiritual abuse and religious trauma, but it didn't have language. This was about 10 years ago. It didn't have language. And it's interesting we are recording this today because my friend, Dr. Laura Anderson, has written a book called When Religion Hurts You. It's the first therapeutic research and resource that's specifically for religious trauma. And it's the book I wish I had 10 years ago. That would have helped me, realize that I was in a spiritually abusive situation if I'd had the verbiage for it. So I'm looking forward to the power of that kind of work and the things that happen online because the more people share their stories, the more others can realize the spiritual abuse is often the foundation for all the other abuses. It helps form your identity and your nervous system responses and your trauma responses and everything, the way that you interact with the world can be tied so deeply to your spiritual formation.
I have friends that have been experienced some of the similar abuses, and I think when you add spiritual abuse, it adds so many extra layers of trauma.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I would agree with
Because
that.
you can recover from a lot of things and get better. I think when somebody abuses you using God and using the church, it just compounds it so much more. Not compared traumas, but I've seen the recovery and it just takes a lot longer.
It's so integral to your core of how you understand yourself um, and your source of comfort and refuge. There's nowhere to go when they violate your spirituality. Yeah, so I empathize with that and relate to it.
You were recently on Shiny Happy People. Tell us a little bit about that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and it's exciting time for Shiny Happy People as well because we were just nominated for a Critics' Choice Award yesterday. Yeah, it Shiny Happy People was a documentary project that was untitled that came my way as a result of my internet work. The producers were referred to me through another participant on the show, another castmate, and I went and recorded it without really fully understanding what the project was going to be. I just knew that I was ready to participate in something very visible and gave it my best. And none of us castmates met each other, or there wasn't a lot of cohesiveness around the project. Deadline got pushed back a couple times. We didn't really know what we were making, what we were participating in, but we trusted the producers really well. Like they seemed to have the heart of the story and the heart of survivors as their first priority. And it turned out to be the best instinct for all of us. We all are just very proud and gratified to have been part of a project that is illuminating the way those abuses happen and the impact that it's happening on our wider culture. Um, and it broke all the records at Amazon, and it debuted, really high. And it's been a fun ride. Um, yeah. Is there anything specific you want to know about Tiny
Oh
Happy
yeah.
People? I mean, that's like my
Um,
overview.
I mean, as somebody who grew up in the Baptist church, I mean, we were on the outskirts of, the Bill Gothry. It was, we knew people because we were homeschooled, but we were not in that
Hmm.
camp, so to speak. We
Hmm.
we knew people,
Right.
but we were not in it. We were more under the
Hmm.
James Dobson arena, which
Yes. I think what I hope is a lot of people take away is how related all of these names are. Bill Gothard and James Dobson, were contemporaries. Their work influenced one another. There's enough there to say that they had a working friendship. And the followers use a lot of the same resources. So a lot of the IBLP followers also, were listening to Adventures in Odyssey and reading Strong Willed Child and participating in all of Dobson's focus on the family ministries. Also the way that the IBLP works, like I was also not a paid member. I didn't attend any conferences, but I was mentored by people using the IBLP's message as an evangelism tool, and they recruited within churches. So they were heavily influencing our church and our wider denomination. So we were part of Southern Baptist Convention, and my church was pastored by one of the presidents of the Southern Baptist Convention and is very much under the influence of the Institute of Basic Life Principles. But most of the membership would not have even known that. What they knew was um, there were these upstanding families with lots of children who are also involved in leadership, and they're good Christians that we should all aspire to be. Um, and so their lifestyle and behaviors would trickle down into our congregation, but nobody knew, top of mind that they were participating in Bill Gothard's belief system.
I can see that. I mean, that makes sense why we saw remnants, but we were not a part of it. But
Right.
because I went to a lot of Baptist churches during the 90s, I would say.
Yeah, that's the heyday of
So,
it. Yeah. 90s, early
yeah.
2000s.
Um, is there anything else you'd like to tell us about that? That,
About
yeah,
Chinese
that
people or the
either.
Um, nothing specific comes to mind. I mean, I think one of the best parts of Shiny Happy People is the actual fourth episode where it shows the wider political strategy that is impacting America. And these are not people who just are politically active, as is their American right. These are people who are using the political system in order to promote their dominionism theology, which is to take over the world. They don't really believe in religious freedom for everyone. They want to use America's, platform of religious freedom so that they can gain their stronghold. And I think the documentary did a good job of demonstrating some of the behind the scenes infrastructure that's in place to work through super PACs and young leadership. That's impacting our headlines and our laws, as we speak. The country is becoming more conservative as a result of those efforts.
Yes. I would say there's a teeny tiny bit of good in that and a lot of bad.
Well, diversity is good, right? And everyone is entitled to their personal beliefs, and that is what America was founded on. Um, democracy values, pluralistic voices, and that's what's getting lost, but by design, because in the IBLP and in other fundamentalist groups, they don't believe in pluralism, and they're not working towards that pluralism. So they don't really want everybody to have a seat at the table. Um, yeah, it's,
Okay. Um, I think that's a great point to bring up. Um, you've written some books. Tell us about that.
yeah. Well, I have some little books that are of no consequence that I in my journey to become an author. The one that's worth talking about is A Well-Trained Wife, um, which is coming out with St. Martin's Press, August of 2024, and it is now open for pre-orders. It opened last week. And it's the story of how I got in and out of fundamentalism, um, and all the things that I learned, changed and journeyed in the path to myself, coming home to myself as a result of that like 40-year journey to lose myself in high control religion, find myself again and pull us out of it into safety and recovery. Um, One of the things that sets my book apart from other cult memoirs is that I do spend a chunk of time exploring what recovery looked like and what it meant, because that is the ultimate character arc. I was a person before high control religion got me and returned in recovery back to my own autonomy. And that's the journey that I wanted to tell. It's not just a series of bad things that happened to me. They were part, plot points on a journey that I have come through. And I hope that it's inspiring to other survivors to know that they can overcome the hard things that happen to them too. Like trauma, one of the things I say frequently is that trauma already took your past. It shouldn't get to take your present and your future too. So recovery is the tool that helps us take our lives back.
Yes. That's a lot of the reason I do this show. We talk more about recovery than what happened in the past because we don't need to relive it. We don't need to.
Hmm.
We can get the highlights, and people can use their imaginations from there. So, I mean,
Yeah.
um, speaking of recovery, what have you done for recovery? What?
A shorter question might be what I have not done. I'm very, very fierce about my recovery. I feel like I'm my first advocate before I expect anyone else to advocate for me or to fight for me or to provide for me. I try to show up for myself. So that has been like manifested in a way that means I will try. If someone says a modality is having success for other survivors, I looked for caregivers who were skilled at it and I gave it a shot. It looks like being really religious almost about my self care, like understanding that no, I can't skip my creature needs. And that's probably an ongoing, balance because life happens and trauma happens and activation, comes in seasons and waves. So personal self care is sometimes challenging to keep at the forefront, but it's absolutely essential, to um, having what it takes to recover. Recovery is really hard work and it's brave and it involves the nervous system and the emotions so much that if you're not feeding your body and drinking water and moving and giving yourself time to hear yourself think is a really big one. You'll be overcome either by your past and the damage that was done or by other voices who, are looking for pliable young minds to control. Like cult hopping is a very real phenomenon. People will leave one toxic environment and fall into another simply because they're more familiar with that dynamic. Their bodies just find a familiarity to it and it's easier and it's not always very conscious. So to make it that conscious and to make that something that you can see, that takes determination and very specific intentionality. So I've tried all the big trauma modalities, EMDR and brain spotting and somatic experience and awareness, embodiment. I tried cognitive behavior therapy. I didn't find it to be very helpful for trauma, and that's a very common testimonial for trauma survivors. Simply talking about your trauma can be very re traumatizing and not very effective in rewiring the brain and how how we experience, what happened to us in waves in the recovery process. Um, a lot of it's been a health journey, like just taking care of my body and dealing with all the things when the body keeps the score that like manifests in physical symptoms. So a lot of recovery has been dealing with like the migraines and panic attacks, anxiety attacks, night terrors, night sweats, um, all the things that come with it, the aches and pains of chronic fatigue, stuff that comes up as a result of trauma symptoms. A lot of trauma survivors have chronic illness, and so much amazing, exciting research has been done recently to show that that's a trauma. That's trauma that's stored in your body, and if you can heal the trauma, then you indirectly heal the symptom. Um, so that's been a big part because I have a whole separate story that's just medical health that turned out to all be related to my trauma experiences that
Okay.
um, I I won't cede, I won't cede. I won't give up more of my life to what happened.
How has this affected your family?
Oh, that's a good question. Family is a very fluid thing, I think. And that's one of the things I discover outside of fundamentalism because the family was like the cornerstone of fundamentalism. And producing this quiverful and all of the high control behaviors focused on family dynamics. So coming out of fundamentalism as a family, which I did with my children, it has been very complex. They were young children when I left. They were 10 and under, and they're adults now. So those are their teenage years that we were healing. And also I was completely flipping how I parented. Um, I parented as I tried to parent as a fundamentalist when they were very young, and then a lot of my rebellion manifested in my motherhood because I was not willing to hurt them or to do things follow fundamentalist practices basically that I thought were antithetical to the kind of mother I wanted to be. So in recovery, I was actively changing my parenting style in many times in ways that younger me would have thought was wrong or being a bad mom or a sinner, whatever language we want to use. So like with my work today, I'm just very private about my children. I don't talk about them. I like protect their privacy, their identities, um their young adulthood. This is my memoir and my interpretation of my experiences. And um, just like siblings they have different childhoods because they have different versions of their parents. Their experience of what we went through is their own, and I don't want to speak for that. So um, it's very compartmentalized. My family now, like
Mhm.
I'm who I am to them as their mom,
Mhm.
not as a trauma survivor.
What about
Or
siblings,
that's separate.
your parents?
I have their support to do this work. They've been supportive the whole way in recovery. But they are all still they're all still evangelical Christians in a very fundamentalist environment. They do not agree with me ideologically, which is okay. That's their journey. And they had a different experience than I did. And we have found ways, like a lot of people who have political and spiritual differences in their families, we have found ways to have boundaries, to use boundaries carefully while still being supportive of one another.
That's Can you tell us a little bit about that? Like, what would you recommend for people going through?
So yeah, this comes up a lot for survivors. It really does. I know so many survivors have to cut family off, or they have to, for their own safety, estrange themselves from situations that led to their trauma. So what I always say is start with, are you safe? First and foremost is your safety. Sometimes periods of time are apart are necessary so that you can do the hard work of healing. If the harm is continuing, that's a different situation. Like in my situation, my family was not the cause of my harm. So I didn't need to separate from them to stop harm from happening. Um, it was all external. Um, As for boundaries, I have something, a little technique I use called the I can list, which helps me have a more positive outlook than feeling trapped by my family or um, inundated with what I can't do. There are some things I cannot do, and if I stay in that place where I'm like focused on what I can't do, I'll trigger panic attacks, because I'll feel pressured that I have to do these things. Example, like a family dinner during an election cycle or something, something that's just too stressful. Um, so the I can list helps me flip the boundary to what I can do because my boundaries are about me. So can I show up for an hour or two? Can I bring a dessert and then leave? Can I stay in a hotel instead of spending the night? Like trying out different scenarios and deciding what feels good in my body is helps me say, well, I can do this. And then if they don't like that, that's on them. But I can do this, and this is as far as I can go. There have been years where the best I can do is to send a card, you know, or the best I can do is visit for a few days instead of be there for every activity. I know people who have had to move away. They lived next door to their families. They had to move, because in order to stay in relationship, they couldn't live so close. Um, that all comes through boundary work, knowing what you can tolerate.
Those are very good examples. And I think that's, a good thing to realize, what can I do first? I think that's a good example. I really like that. I might keep that.
Yeah, it's a handy thing to reach for because your nervous system is activated when you feel like you can't do something and you're being pressured. And that makes it really hard to think clearly and make a sound decision. So that little trick is a nice way to take your power back.
Yes. How has this impacted your health?
Oh, that's yeah. It I'm better now. I'll start there. I'm better now. It has been a journey. I was diagnosed with what they thought was MS in 2013, which I left. I escaped in 2007. I started trauma therapy in 2011. And I was so sick in 2013 that I couldn't see the color white. Everything was pink. I was passing out all the time. Was having week-long migraine, muscle body weakness. Um, couldn't sometimes sit up and hold my head up. And they ran every test they knew around, and they guessed, like they thought I had multiple sclerosis and would be in a wheelchair and blind. And I got really angry at that because I did not accept that I came through this traumatic experience and did so much work to be safe, and then that was going to be my story, that I was going to end up like that. So I started therapy actually to deal with the medical journey. That's how I got into trauma therapy, was how I made the switch from cognitive behavioral, which was not really working for me. I started going to trauma therapy in order to deal with medical trauma. Medical trauma was my gateway into understanding what trauma was and how it impacts the body. And then I had some really good doctors that kind of understood how to say this is in your body and in your head without dismissing it and saying it's all in your head. Um, there's a difference there, like it's not in my head. It's actually physically happening to me, but also it's in my head because it's got trauma roots. Um, and so it took years, but I made gains in strength, and there's a lot of there's a lot to this part of the story that is more than we could cover today. But um, I think it's also an experience I hear reflected in a lot of survivors, that they are experiencing physical impacts long term, sometimes very debilitating physical impacts because of what they've gone through, and phobias and things that it's very hard to overcome. And there can be a second wave of medical journey that is really hard to navigate, especially in America where resources are tight and unavailable and very expensive, and medicines have side effects that then you have to have, help for your side effects. And, it can be very complicated. I think it's an area that just needs more research and more time and attention to it. And I think that's happening, but very slowly.
I would agree with you. I mean, there's a lot of resources and different things you can try, but no, the body I mean, it sounds like your body said, I need help and I need help now.
Mhm. Yes. It was like shutting down really hard.
um, so
Mhm.
yeah, I'm glad you listened to your body. So our bodies tell us what's going on. I can relate to that. I
Correct.
can relate to that in many ways. How has this impacted your career?
Well, it became it. I wasn't planning on that. I have a background in marketing, as a copywriter and a UX writer, which is user experience. And I've always written for the internet, and I had that very separated from what I did online. And my online work was low key until about 2.5 years ago. Um, when my platform blew up, when I started making reels about the Duggar family and the IBLP and Christian fundamentalist abuses in general, um, that became an extra like full-time job. So I had a couple years there where I was doing two very demanding full-time jobs, 80 to 90 hours a week of content creation plus my job. And that included writing my memoir. So I was just working really hard for a long time. And then through some other changes in my life, um, it's this year, like I sold the book last year, and this year I've been traveling most of the year. So my content work is my career, and I feel called to this work. I feel like it's um, working with survivors is probably always what I meant to be, and um, I'm committed. I'm committed to that.
Well, I mean, I watch the reels and I can relate to them. So I know there's a lot of other people that can relate to them as well. How has this impacted your finances?
Um, it's a funny question. Oh, and I saw it on the list. I was like, well, I mean, that's a fluid thing too. So much of this is fluid. Life after fundamentalism moves. I would say money, my attitudes towards money have had to be deconstructed because in fundamentalism, money was handled very differently than out here in the real world. You know, you were shamed if you wanted it, and you had to tithe, but the people in power all have it. The people on the bottom don't have it. There's a lot of poverty involved. As I got out of fundamentalism and I was a single mom, I had to, work on a career, which is not something that I was equipped to do at the time, had not spent any time in my life preparing for. And so I had to start from the ground up and build a life, and build a career. So that took a lot of work. It was eventually successful. Um, and then I sold my book well, which was wonderful. But then I also got a divorce, which was not wonderful for my second husband. So I think I just view money now as a tool. I understand that it will come and it will go. And it's an important aspect of agency and freedom. It's very hard to become free from high control groups without the accessibility to money. So I spend a lot of time like thinking and talking about how women can have their own finances and have no shame around needing to build them and to be smart with their money. There's some wealth coaches that I follow that I share a lot that just teach women the basics of money because in patriarchy, we're not really taught how to effectively use it as a tool. And it becomes very emotional and a method of control. So, and I come from a lot of financial abuse. So this is an ongoing area too for deconstruction.
Yes, I just had an interview with a lawyer and she talked about banks working with those getting out of abusive relationships and how
Mm,
banks are struggling for customers right now. So, um,
well,
to take that into consideration when you're working, with some of the banks. So they're trying to change the banking world so it's more easily accessible to those who've gotten out of those abusive relationships because credit can be ruined because of
mm,
being in those types of relationships.
absolutely. That's important work.
So, uh, how has this impacted your parenting?
Oh, it completely changed it. Um, I think the biggest thing that I changed was I started taking my children seriously at a young age. I did not look at them as something to mold and to force to conform into a mindset that I decided for them. I never pressured them to choose a spiritual path, a religious path. I didn't shame them for ordinary healthy development. Um, they're given unconditional love, which is not something in fundamentalism. Um, there was no, like, when I stopped spanking them, there was no corporal punishment. I think parenting is an area that completely reformed from one side to the other side, and it is ongoing because even though they're adults, um, they have their own traumatic pasts to unpack. And I very many times am the only advocate that they had, but I'm also sometimes complicit in the harm that they experienced. And they need to be able to come to me and say, "You chose this and it hurt, and I need to talk about it." And so parenting today looks like supporting what they want for their lives, but also being always available when they are in process and not getting defensive and shutting them down.
I think that's important, especially coming out of fundamentalism. There's a lot of scars.
Yeah, yeah. And parents can be really defensive about why those scars happened because they meant well. Most parents, the majority of parents, meant well and believed leadership telling them that these methods and techniques would be in the best interest of their family and their child. And it's the fruit does not bear that. The fruit bears harm. It can be really hard for a parent to admit their part in that. Um, Also, abusers are made; they're not born. So that's like looking at the fruit of practices is extremely important, um, because there's a recipe. There's a recipe to create an abuser, and there's a recipe to create a healthy person.
Yes, that is true. Um, is there anything else you like to add on parenting?
Just love your kids, give them unconditional love, and there is no idea that is more important than a person. So, I mean, that's the most unfundamentalist thing somebody can do is decide that they are not going to place ideology over people. And the first place that starts is your children.
That's very well put. Um, what are some of the best advice you could give someone leaving Bill Gothard's teachings or any other cult for that matter?
It's a little unconventional, but I tell people to take lots of walks. Um, Walking will help move trauma through your body. It helps move energy through your body. But the most important thing that walking does is allow you to hear yourself. And it can be anxiety producing to somebody who is not accustomed to hearing themselves or does a lot of self censure and judgment and harmful self talk. But it's an important step to give yourself time to hear yourself and get in touch again with your intuition, your own conscience. The other thing I say a lot is inner child therapy was one of the most important modalities I used because it got me connected to who I was before the cult, who I was before high control thought, and all of the situations that made me vulnerable to that group. Um, so that looks like inner child work looks like a lot of spending time with little you, like what you like to do as a little child. I like to color, I like to climb trees, I like to play outside. So um, as I was leaving and deconstructing that thought, I spent a lot of time doing the things that I loved to do when I was 6. Um, Also, surrounding yourself with other survivors who have been out is important because the number one thing that people talk about is the loss of community. It's very hard, like especially I had a formal shunning that was part of my experience. is really hard when you leave religion, to lose the community aspect. That's a motivator for people joining it in the first place, is to have a sense of belonging. And because there are so many outsiders now, exiles and survivors, that it's important to go looking for where those people are and to surround yourself with new people who can understand what you're going through.
What is the sorry. What do you do for self-care?
Covered this a little bit earlier, but self-care looks like taking care of me, like as if I was a little baby that needed a mom. I put myself to bed. I take myself for walks. I make sure she gets a bath and she eats enough food. Like, it's really simple. And these are the things that people struggle with. Taking care of your body is first. Moving your body every day, yoga, walking. I like to run. I like to play outside. I like to move my body in ways that feel fun, like dancing and stuff like that. Remembering to play, time alone and doing the things that I like. I'm an introvert. I'm an Enneagram 4. So I like to go to the movies alone. Um, I like to take road trips alone and travel alone. I've been solo traveling most of 2023, and it's been incredible to be with who I like. I like me. So it's nice to spend time with me, and not taking care of. As a mom of many kids, and I was mom so young, I take care of everybody around me really easily and intuitively. So it's self care for me. Sometimes taking myself out of situations where I might revert into caretaking. And sometimes that means that most of the time it means physical removal. Like, I need to go be alone, or I will start taking care of people, which is okay in moderation. It just doesn't need to be to the extent that I do it.
What is the best advice, or what is the best advice ever given to you about leaving fundamentalism?
It was ask questions, question everything. It's the piece of, I go back to this almost every day, question everything. When you have a penchant for the comfort of fundamentalism, it is very comforting to have the right answer, to have a formula that people tell you works. Fundamentalism thrives in chaotic moments in history. So we have all this chaos happening in our world right now. It also makes us, on the whole, very vulnerable to fundamentalist thinking, because we're looking for surety. So being able to question it and not take one person's viewpoint as the gospel, to refuse gurus. Like, I will not have a guru again. I will not have a holy person. I will not adhere to a single book for wisdom. Those are important, like, boundaries to put on the experience, but also even that, like, how is that working for me? Check the fruit in my life frequently. What is what I'm doing producing, and is that healthy, positive? Takes self-reflection and self-awareness. It's ongoing. To live a life of inquiry is an ongoing situation.
How has this impacted your faith?
I always answer this with I identify now as spiritually private. I really, like I said a few minutes ago, I like a good binary. I like a good firm black and white answer. People are always trying to pin me down, like, what do you believe today? As soon as I answer that question, I put myself in a box. And there's a very real part of me that loves to be in the right box. Like, oh yes, they're happy with me because I said the thing they want me to say. And they've made sure I'm safe, or I'm somebody they want to hear. And that people pleasing part of me gets toxic really quickly, and it's not genuine. So I have to answer the question by giving myself a space to say that is fluid, that is private, and if I how I live, my character is all you need to know. People should be looking at me. They should be questioning the things I say. They should be checking me against other resources that land well for them, because I'm not anybody's guru either. Um, and my character should be all they need to know. Am I the kind of person they want to spend time listening to? They can answer that for themselves. I need to have integrity. You know, that's how I answer that.
Is there anything else you'd like to add?
Yeah. Um, just that, like, I know this is a recovery themed podcast, and um, I like to remind survivors that you deserve to heal. The healing is possible, and you deserve to fight for yourself. Always be your first advocate. Choose yourself. We are conditioned to wait on a savior in high control religion, wait on rescue, somebody else to see our need and meet it and to take us seriously. But salvation and rescue starts with us taking our own suffering seriously. So if you can remember to choose yourself and to advocate for yourself, that's the spirit of a survivor.
Okay, I think that's it. Thanks, Tia, and
Okay.
thanks, guys, for listening. This is Rachel in Recovery. We'll be back next. Actually, we'll be taking a break after this. This will be my last episode of the year because I am taking the holidays off, and I will be running the Best of Rachel for the next of 2023, and we will be back in 2024. Woo. All right. Thanks, guys.